The Boar Hunt. Written by Jose Vasconcelos. Translated by Paul Waldorf. Now let's preview some of the vocabulary we'll see in this text. Tenaciously. Tenaciously is an adverb that means stubbornly or persistently. If someone does something, even though it is difficult to reach a goal and they do it over and over again, then they are doing that tenaciously. Sporadic. Sporadic is an adjective that means irregular or occasional. So if someone does something only once in a while, then that is sporadic. Atonement. Atonement is a noun that means something done to make up for a sin, injury, or loss. So let's say by accident you hurt a friend, then you might give them ice or you might give them a band-aid. You are seeking atonement. Implicit. Implicit is an adjective that is suggested but not directly stated. So if the author states that the kids are on a bus, we might assume that the kids are going to school. The author hasn't stated that, it's just suggested, so that's implicit. Infamy is a noun that means extreme wickedness or shameful evil. So characters that exemplify infamy include the Joker from Batman or Maleficent. The next word is rejuvenate. Rejuvenate is a verb that means to make fresh or young again. An example of this is in the movie Tangle. Gothel tries to use the flower and Rapunzel's hair to make herself look young again. Lethargy. Lethargy is a noun which means sluggish, inactive, or drowsiness. You can see that the cat is showing lethargy. Is the man showing lethargy? No, you can see that he's very active, so he is not showing lethargy. Is the little girl showing lethargy? Yes, she is rubbing her eyes because she is tired. Impotent. Impotent is an adjective that means ineffective, powerless, or helpless. If you are out of power, then you might feel impotent. So if you've been busy all day working, at the end of the day you might be tired and you might feel impotent. Sometimes we say that we have our hands tied behind the back, which means that we feel powerless. This is another example of impotent. Now, strong or weak. If you're impotent, would you be strong or would you be weak? That is right. Weak is a synonym of impotent. Horde. Horde is a noun that means a large group or multitude. So all of this money would be a horde. A big group of people would be another example of a horde. One bull would not be an example of a horde because there's only one. Now let's build background. The boar hunt takes place in the not too distant past in a remote, unexplored jungle in Peru. So the time would be the not too distant past, which means it's in the past, but it's not too long ago. So it might have happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but probably not more than 30 years ago. In a remote, unexplored jungle in Peru. So the place is a jungle in Peru. Did you know? Did you know wild boars are wild hogs with razor-sharp tusks, pointy ears, straight tails, and a hard, thick hide covering their chests? They weigh an average of 200 pounds, although some may weigh as much as 500 pounds. Wild boars run much faster than domestic hogs and are naturally aggressive towards other creatures. Aggressive means they want to fight, including humans. The prospect of bagging a wild boar, despite the danger or perhaps because of it, has challenged hunters since ancient times. Sometimes hunters refer to hunting an animal and killing the animal as bagging an animal. So when they say bagging a wild boar, they're referring to hunting and killing a wild boar. Now let's begin reading the text. We were 4 companions, and we went by the names of our respective nationalities: the Colombian, the Peruvian, the Mexican, The fourth, a native of Ecuador, was called Quito for short. Unforeseen chance had joined us together a few years ago on a large sugar plantation on the Peruvian coast. In this paragraph, we could see the number 1 next to Quito, so the author is letting us know that he has some more details to share with us. Perhaps he was called this because Quito is the capital of Ecuador, and he was from Ecuador. We worked at different occupations during the day, so they worked at different jobs during the day and met during the evening in our off time. Not being Englishmen, we did not play cards. Instead, our constant discussions led to disputes. These didn't stop us from wanting to see each other the next night, however, to continue the interrupted debates and support them with new arguments. Nor did the rough sentences of the preceding wrangles indicate a lessening of our affection, of which we assured ourselves reciprocally with the clasping of hands and a look. Here the author is letting us know that these four friends debate quite a bit, but even though they debate, they're still friends and they let each other know that they're not mad at each other by clasping hands, so shaking hands, and a certain look that they give each other to let each other know, hey, I'm not really mad at you. On Sundays, we used to get on hunting parties. We roamed the fertile glens, stalking generally with poor results, the game of the warm region around the coast, or we entertained ourselves killing birds that flew in the sunlight during the siesta hours. So here they say that they were already hunting or trying to find animals, but with poor results, which means they weren't very good hunters. But they did like to kill birds in the siesta hours. Typically, people like to take naps in the afternoon, maybe between 2 to 4. And so they're saying that in those siesta hours is when they would go to kill birds. We came to be tireless wanderers and excellent marksmen. Whenever we climbed a hill and gazed at the imposing range of mountains in the interior, its attractiveness stirred us and we wanted to climb it. What attracted us more was the trans-Andean region, fertile plateaus extending on the other side of the range in the direction of the Atlantic towards the immense land of Brazil. It was as if primitive nature called us to her beast. The vigor of the fertile, untouched jungles promised to rejuvenate our minds, the same vigor which rejuvenates the strength and the thickness of the trees each year. At times, we devised crazy plans. As with all things that are given a lot of thought, these schemes generally materialize, which means they actually happen. So they created plans that they felt were kind of crazy, and then they were able to follow through with those plans. Ultimately, nature and events are largely what our imaginations make them out to be. And so we went ahead planning and acting. At the end of the year, with arranged vacations, accumulated money, good rifles, abundant ammunition, stone and mud-proof boots, 4 hammocks, and a half dozen, which means 6, faithful Indians, our caravan descended the Andean slopes leading to the endless green ocean. At last we came upon a village at the edge of the Marañón River. Here we changed our safari. The region we were going to penetrate had no roads. It was unexplored underbrush into which we could only enter by going down the river in a canoe. In time we came to the area where we proposed to carry out the purpose of our journey, the hunting of wild boars. We had been informed that boars traveled in herds of several thousands, occupying a region, eating grass, and staying together, exploiting the grazing areas, organized just like an army. They are very easy to kill if one attacks them when they are scattered out, satisfying their appetites, and are be given over to the lights of victory. When they march about hungry, on the other hand, they are usually vicious. In our search, we glided down river between imposing jungles with our provisions and the company of 3 faithful Indian oarsmen. One morning we stopped at some huts near the river. Thanks to the information gathered there, we decided to disembark a little farther on in order to spend the night on the land, and continue the hunt for the boars in the thicket the following day. Sheltered in a backwater we came ashore, and after a short exploration found a clearing in which to make camp. We unloaded the provisions and the rifles, tied the boat securely, then with the help of the Indians set up our camp 1/2 kilometer from the river bank. In marking the path to the landing, we were careful not to lose ourselves in the thicket. The Indians withdrew towards their huts, promising to return 2 days later. At dawn they would set out in search for the prey. Though night had scarcely come out, and the heat was great, we gathered at the fire to see each other's faces, to look instinctively for protection. We talked a little, smoked, confessed up to being tired, and decided to go to bed. Each hammock had been tied by one end to a single tree, firm though not very thick in the trunk. Stretching out from here, the author takes a break and they want us to look at this painting. And the question is, what elements of this painting reflect the sense of foreboding in the story? When they're asking elements, they're talking about the basic elements of art, which include line, shape and form, color, space, value, and texture. So they want you to look at the elements such as color that the illustrator uses, as well as value and space, to understand what you're feeling as you look at this painting. Foreboding synonyms include apprehension, uneasiness, suspicion. So an example of this would be if you have to walk down a dark hallway, how would you feel? Typically, we might be suspicious and we might think, oh, is there anybody else in this hallway with me? And we might be a little scared. So foreboding is typically when you are foreshadowing that something bad might happen. So look at the illustration or the painting and what elements of this painting reflect the sense of foreboding in the story. They fell asleep though the most persistent enemy pursues him. We scarcely notice the supreme grandeur of the remote tropical night. And so something is hunting the hunters because there's a persistent enemy that's pursuing or looking for them. I don't know whether it was the light of the magnificent dawn or the strange noises which awakened me and made me sit up in my hammock and look carefully at my surroundings. I saw nothing but the awakening of that life which at night falls into the lethargy of the jungle. I called my sleeping companions, and alert and seated in our hanging beds, we dressed ourselves. We were preparing to jump to the ground when we clearly heard a somewhat distant, sudden sound of rustling branches. Since it did not continue, however, we descended confidently, so they got down from the trees, washed our faces with water from our canteens, and slowly prepared and enjoyed breakfast. By about 11 in the morning we were armed and bold and preparing to make our way through the jungle. But then the sound again. Its persistence and proximity in the thicket made us change our minds. An instinct made us take refuge in our hammocks. When you seek refuge, it's because you want to be safe, so they feel safe in their hammocks. We cautiously moved our cartridges and rifles into them again, and without consulting each other, we agreed on the idea of putting our provisions safely away, their provisions being their food and their water. We passed them up into the hammocks, and we ourselves finally climbed in. Stretched out, face down, comfortably suspended with rifles in hand, we did not have to wait long. Black, agile boars quickly appeared from all directions. We welcomed them with shouts of joy and well-aimed shots, so now they're shooting at the boars. Some fell immediately, giving comical snorts, but many more came out of the jungle. So they've already started shooting at some of the boars, and some of the boars have already started dying. But more and more keep coming. We shoot again, spending all the cartridges in the magazine. Then we stopped to reload. Finding ourselves safe in the height of our hammocks, we continued after a pause. So when they're talking about cartridges, they're talking about the ammunition or the bullets for their rifles, and a magazine is the supply chamber from which the cartridges are fed into the firing chamber. So the magazine is where they put the bullets into the rifle. We counted dozens of them. At a glance we made rapid calculations of the magnitude of the destruction. While the boars continued to come out of the jungle in unaccountable numbers, instead of going on their way or fleeing, they seemed confused. All of them emerged from the jungle, where it was easy for us to shoot them. Occasionally we had to stop firing, because the frequent shooting heated the barrels of our rifles. While they were cooling, we smoked and were able to joke, celebrating our good fortune. So they're very happy. They're celebrating because all of these boars are coming. But they're also starting to run out of ammunition. The impotent anger of the boars amazed us. They raised their tusks in our direction, uselessly threatening us. We laughed at their snorts, quietly aimed at those who were near, and bang, a dead boar. We carefully studied the angle of the shoulder blade so that the bullet would cross the heart. The slaughter lasted for hours, so they were in the trees shooting at the boars for many hours. At 4 p.m. we noticed an alarming shortage of our ammunition, which means they're running out of bullets. We had been well supplied and had shot at will. Though the slaughter was gratifying, which means that they like killing the boars must have numbered, as we had been informed previously, several thousands, because their hordes didn't diminish, which means there's more and more coming, and even though they're killing some of the boars, there's still more there. On the contrary, they gathered directly beneath our hammocks in increasing groups. They slashed furiously at the trunk of the tree, which held the 4 points of the hammocks. The marks of the tusks remained on the hard bark. Not without a certain fear we watched them gather compactly, tenaciously, in tight masses against the resisting trunk. We wondered what would happen to a man who fell within their reach. Our shots were now sporadic, well aimed, carefully husbanded. They did not drive away the aggressive beasts, but only redoubled their fury. So every time that they're shooting at the boars or the beasts are getting madder and madder or furious. One of us ironically noted that from being the attackers we had gone on the defensive, so now that they are the ones being hunted, when before they were the hunters. We did not laugh very long at the joke. Now we hardly shot at all. We needed to save our cartridges, or they needed to save their bullets. The husband something is to manage it in a careful, economic way. The afternoon waned and evening came upon us. After consulting each other, we decided to eat in our hammocks. We applauded ourselves for taking the food up, meat, bread, and bottles of water. Stretching ourselves on our hammocks, we passed things to each other, sharing what we needed. The boars deafened us with their angry snorts. After eating, we began to feel calm. We lit cigars. Surely the boars would go. Their numbers were great, so there's a lot of them, but they would finally leave peacefully. As we said, however, we looked with greedy eyes at the few unused cartridges that remained. Our enemies, like enormous angry ants, stirred beneath us, encouraged by the ceasing of our fire. From time to time we carefully aimed and killed one or two of them, driving off the huge group of useless, enraged boars at the base of the trunk, which served as a prop for our hammocks. So right now the boars are still attacking the tree. Night enveloped us almost without our noticing the change from twilight. Anxiety also overtook us, so they're worried. When would the cursed boars leave? Already there were enough dead to serve as trophies to several dozen hunters. Our feat would be talked about. We had to show ourselves worthy of such fame. Since there was nothing else to do, it was necessary to sleep. Even if we had had enough bullets, it would have been impossible to continue the fight in the darkness. It occurred to us to start a fire to drive the herd off with flames, but apart from the fact that we couldn't leave the place in which we were suspended, there were no dry branches in the lush forest. Finally, we slept. So they wanted to create a fire to make the boars go away. Unfortunately, because they're in a rainforest, all of the branches are wet. We woke up a little after midnight. The darkness was profound, but the well-known noise made us aware that our enemies were still there. So the boars are still attacking the tree even in the night. We imagined they must be the last ones which were leaving, however. If a good army needs several hours to break camp and march off, what can be expected of a vile army of boars but disorder and delay? So the men are thinking that eventually the boars are going to go away. When you say break camp, that means that you are packing up camp and leaving. The following morning we would fire upon the stragglers, but this painful thought bothered us. They were in large and apparently active numbers. What were they up to? Why didn't they leave? We thus spent long hours of worry. Dawn finally came, splendid in the sky but noisy in the jungle, still enveloped inwardly in shadows. We eagerly waited for the sun to penetrate the foliage in order to survey the appearance of the field of battle of the day before. We finally saw made us gasp. It terrified us. The Boers were painstakingly continuing the work they had engaged in throughout the entire night. So the hunters, the men, had thought the Boers would be going away little by little. Unfortunately, the Boers were working all night, and now they're scared. The men are terrified. Guided by some extraordinary instinct, with their tusks they were digging out the ground underneath the tree from which our hammocks hung. They gnawed the roots and continued to undermine. Gnawing the roots means the bottom of the tree has roots and they're biting at those to break up the roots so that the tree will fall down. And continue to undermine them like large industrious rats. Presently the tree was bound to fall, and we with it, among the beasts. From that moment we neither thought nor talked. In desperation we used up our last shots, killing more ferocious beasts. So they're up in the hammocks, and the boars are down below, biting and trying to break down the roots. Still the rest renewed their activity. They seemed to be endowed with intelligence. However much we concentrated our fire against them, they did not stop their attack against the tree. Here is another painting that the story offers us. Soon our shots stopped. We emptied our pistols and then silently listened to the tusks gnawing beneath the soft, wet, pleasantly smelling earth. From time to time the boars pressed against the tree, pushing it and making it creak, eager to smash it quickly. We looked on hypnotized by their devilish activity. It was impossible to flee because the black monsters covered every inch in sight. It seemed to us that, by a sudden inspiration, they were preparing to take revenge on us for the ruthless nature of man, the unpunished destroyer of animals since the beginning of time. Our imagination, distorted by fear, showed us our fate as an atonement for the unpardonable crimes implicit in the struggle of biological selection. So right now he's saying because man has hunted animals for so long, they believe that the Boers are mad at men, all men, not just them, but all men, and so that's why they're attacking them. Before my eyes passed the vision of sacred India, where the believer refuses to eat meat in order to prevent the methodical killing of beasts, and in order to atone for man's evil, bloody, treacherous slaughter, such as ours, for mere vicious pleasure. I felt that the multitude of Boers was raising its accusing voice against me. I now understood the infamy of the hunter. But what was repentance worth, if I was going to die with my companions, hopelessly devoured by that hordes of brutes that with demon-like eyes? Stirred by terror, and without realizing what I was doing, I hung from the upper end of my hammock. I balanced myself in the air. I swung in a long leap. I grasped the branch of a tree, facing the one on which the boars were digging. From there I leaped to other branches, and to others, reviving in myself habits which the species had forgotten. The species he's referring to is mankind. He's saying that before we would be able to do these type of things, such as swing from branch to branch, and we have lost that. But he is remembering it in this moment because of his fear of these boars. The next moment a terrifying sound and unforgettable cries told me of the fall of the tree and the end of my companions. I clung to a trunk, trembling and listening to the chattering of my jaws. Later, the desire to flee gave me back my strength. Leaning out over the foliage, I looked for a path, and I saw the boars in the distance, marching in compressed ranks and holding their insolent snouts in the air. I knew that they were now withdrawing, and I got down from the tree. Horror overwhelmed me as I approached the site of our encampment, but some idea of duty made me return there. Perhaps one of my friends had managed to save himself. I approached hesitantly. Each dead boar made me tremble with fear. So now the tree that they were camping in, or that was holding the hammocks, is knocked down. But what I saw next was so frightful that I could not fix it clearly in my mind. Remains of clothing and footwear. There was no doubt the boars had devoured them. So what he's saying is the boars had eaten his friends. Then I ran toward the river, following the tracks we had made 2 days before. I fled with great haste, limbs stiff from panic. Running with long strides, I came upon the boat. With a great effort I managed to row to the huts. There I went to bed with a high fever which lasted many days. I will participate in no more hunts. I will contribute, if I have to the extermination of harmful beasts. But I will not kill for pleasure. I will not amuse myself with the ignoble pleasure of the hunt. Ignoble means without honor or worth, or, since ig is a negative prefix, not noble.